It's no secret Total Drama has become one of the bigger ongoing cartoon series. The fact that it started all the way back in 2007 and has been able to be so consistent in terms of releasing content is nothing short of impressive. And despite my personal opinions on some of the contents themselves, that doesn't change the fact that I respect the ever-living hell out of the people behind it and wish nothing but success for them. But for about the past 6 months and even more so now, given recent information popping up, I'm incredibly worried about the future of Total Drama. This has stemmed from how the Total Drama Island reboot has been handled by the network HBO Max, Discovery Plus, whatever you want to call them. A network that has become incredibly notorious over the past year or so for their horrible handling of the shows they put on their services, with the animated properties usually getting the worst of it. Almost forgot to mention Cake Entertainment may be involved in some way too, since they're supposedly in charge of how the Total Drama IP gets distributed internationally. Since they're based in the UK, I'd assume the US would be considered international distribution on their end. For those who might not be aware about Total Drama Island even getting a reboot still, I'll give a quick recap. Sometime in February 2021, it was announced there would be 2 new seasons of Total Drama Island. This was huge news for fans of the original competition seasons that weren't too keen on watching Total Drama-Rama, which isn't inherently Drama-Rama's fault, to be clear. That show was clearly marketed towards a younger audience. Most of the frustration from the masses seemed to be stemmed from how it was the only form of new Total Drama content that was being released from 2018 until I guess technically now. So yeah, you could say people were stoked about this announcement. Many theories started rolling around if old cast members would return, how they're even returning to Camp Wawanakwa after it was destroyed in All-Stars, etc. More time would pass, and more information would be revealed as a result about the season little by little, such as it being considered a reboot of sorts, the title still just being called Total Drama Island, how the cast would be completely new just like Revenge of the Island and Pakatu, and what some of the personalities of said cast members would be. Quick side note, while I do understand the concept of it being a reboot, so having the title be that way does make sense in a way, it could end up causing confusion for some when it comes to searching it up on things like Google or YouTube, because if you type in the title Total Drama Island, the same way it's presented through the show's theme song and such, the vast majority of the results through said search will be of the original Total Drama Island season, and that's something that will probably never change since that season has the seniority factor. It's the most well-known season amongst anybody who knows that Total Drama exists. If we're being real with ourselves, most human beings in the world out there probably didn't know Total Drama Island got several more seasons after the first. It's a pretty minor complaint on my end, but the cause for confusion amongst the general masses is very much possible as a result of this name choice. More specific things would come to light about the show's contents too, such as the new island not actually being the original Camp Wawanakwa, but rather a new island that just looks very similar. Christian Potenza no longer voicing Chris McLean, being replaced by Terry McGurran, the executive producer behind the reboot, and the main source of information behind a lot of these reveals and production details. For most of the first quarter of 2023, things had been fairly quiet in terms of new news, until late March 2023, where an English trailer would drop giving no proper release date for said core English audience, and that was questionable in itself in hindsight, but people didn't really think too much of it at the time, mainly because soon after, in early April 2023, a voice actor by the name Fred Kennedy would announce via his Twitter account that he'd be voicing one of the new contestants, Ripper, and about a week after this, the entire series became available in Italy on K2 and Discovery Plus. This combined with the full English version being out there in the world thanks to airing on official networks in Italy, so there's the, English dub option, the fandom thought for sure it would be coming out soon to the United States. Though as more months passed, nothing really happened. Now, in fairness, this isn't technically anything super new when it comes to the Total Drama series in particular, or I guess other shows in general. Shows aren't always released worldwide on the exact same date. It's totally common for them to be, a few months apart depending on the region or what networks decide to do. Total Drama Redonkulous Race, for example, actually premiered in the United States before Canada, despite the entire franchise being a Canadian production crew, airing in the US on September 7th, 2015, while Canada got their first episode on January 4th, 2016. As of right now, the first season of this Total Drama reboot still has yet to be available in the United States, and it has been almost 8 months since it was officially released in Italy, with said English dub being available at the same time. So inevitably, clips of it were able to get posted online in English, and also Italian, obviously. These can't even really be considered leaks in my eyes either, since it was officially released on a network, just not here, so there'd be tons of YouTube channels who were able to watch the show, give their thoughts on it, and post clips from certain episodes. Which at the time, and still kind of now, I don't really think is an issue because me and I'm sure most others were just under the assumption the United States was going to be getting it properly at any moment. That's the main reason I didn't have a problem making a video about the first season at the time. Plus, Terry McGurran seemed to have no problem with fans watching or talking about it either based on his Twitter replies. If the crew or a main person behind a show doesn't seem to have a problem with it, I think it's fair game. More and more months would pass with more regions getting access to the show, including the UK in July, Latin America in August, and now most recently Canada on October 21st, where the first season is still technically airing in Canada and will conclude on December 2nd. While I won't deny there's clearly markets for total drama outside the United States, I think it's a pretty safe bet to make that the fan base in the US is one of, if not the largest viewer base for total drama. Canada may be first though, or second, or tied for first. There's no real way for me to get the exact demographics here. Point is, there are still so many people who didn't get the chance to watch it back in April and are just completely in the dark. The amount of comments I've seen on different videos related to this reboot, including my own videos, asking how or where to watch it is very high. Like, most people are still asking it to this day. This type of confusion should never be a thing. It just shouldn't be a thing. Especially for a show that's trying to do a reboot and make an attempt at returning to what made it so great in the first place after years of not getting any new content like this. No other season of Total Drama has had such a ridiculously sporadic release schedule. The fact that we're in a timeline where Italy is about to get the second season before the United States even gets the first is just not okay to me. It's one thing if there was never an English trailer that dropped, but there was. Any English viewer who sees this is going to think they're going to get to watch it at least somewhat soon after said trailer drops. There's no way of knowing this for sure because I don't think they've stated it or would say it, but I wouldn't be surprised if Max/Discovery initially gave the impression to Terry, the cast, and the crew that the series would release in English shortly after said trailer came out. Whether that be in Canada or the US, the intent for it to come out late spring, early summer could have very well been a thing, and that's why they were being vocal about it on Twitter at the time. This, combined with the English trailer, makes me think so. To be clear, I could be totally wrong on this, but I wouldn't put it past one of these networks to do something as sketchy as that. This was the same corporation that was canceling a bunch of shows and pulling them from the network, you know, stuff like Infinity Train was getting screwed, all for tax write-offs. They have no shame. They just don't. They do seem to care somewhat about Total Drama to a degree since it has at least aired in some places out there, but that's still not enough of a proper excuse for this absurd handling. It's just not. Just as recently as November 20th, which is the day before I'm writing this video, Terry, being the generous soul he is, continues to reply to folks asking about what's going on with the US release for the show, saying he has zero knowledge on the release date despite the US being the first country the crew delivered the completed episodes to. This guy has no reason to lie about this, by the way. The network is just completely killing the general hype for the show with all this sporadic releases. It sucks because I feel like by the time it actually does air here in the States, the hype revolved around it is not going to be nearly as high as if it could have been if it aired in the summertime or around the same times as Canada. Or just had, you know, some kind of proper marketing at all. This goes double if they decide to drop all the episodes at once on Max instead of doing a weekly release schedule. I'm so tired of these streaming services doing that with new shows because it completely kills the longevity for conversation about said shows through social media. One of the only recent exceptions to this that I can think of is Netflix's live-action adaptation of One Piece. I feel like people are still talking about that, but even that's a very particular example because they're adapting a semi-revised version of the most successful manga of all time. Summer would have been literally perfect timing to air it. You know, since it's a show centered around a summer camp-esque island, it seems like pretty easy math to me. We shouldn't have to be in a situation where the literal executive producer of the show is as in the dark as someone like me because of horrible network management. It just comes off as unbelievably unprofessional to me. There's no doubt in my mind this show will still air in the US. The idea of it never airing didn't cross my mind. It's just a matter of when it's gonna happen. Though I can't help but fear how the future of this series will be because of how horribly this reboot has been handled by the network/marketing team thus far. A too little too late type of situation with the damage already being too severe. If I'm wrong, great. I'd love to be wrong about this. Let the US release garner as much hype whenever it comes out as it would have if it came out in summer or spring 2023, because it genuinely deserves it. I already did a semi-general review of the first season back in April, but TLDR, this new season is genuinely enjoyable to me. And that's saying something because I'm not even really the target audience anymore. It's got a likable cast, good challenges, more interesting interactions between said said characters, it's about on par with Revenge of the Island, if not a bit better in my opinion. This reboot deserves so much better than the cards it's been dealt, and all I can really do is hope this doesn't affect the future too badly. Some may say Total Drama has run its course long enough, which is totally fair, but to go out on a note like this with a genuinely good series that had some of the worst marketing I've ever seen for an animated show in recent history would be kind of a cruddy pill to swallow. Just sucks how the animation industry is continuing to get the short end of the stick like this, despite proving time and time again it's worthy of being taken seriously as the rest of its fellow mediums. Sending as many good vibes as I can to the crew behind Total Drama, and I'm hoping you guys can do the same, and just the other animated shows and crews out there having to deal with these shameless networks not seeing them as good enough. Just feels like the more time passes, the more I can't help but just, shake my head in shame.